Father brought his mistress to Thanksgiving while my family shut me out, and now I'm questioning who my family really is. My mother died at age 67 in 2022 after a brutal fight with a terminal illness. My world shifted forever a year before she passed, when she became permanently disabled, tethered to an oxygen tank 24/7. That's when I discovered my father's betrayal. He showed me something on his computer, and there it was, a dating website, bold as brass, saved in his browser favorites. That moment still gnaws at me. I wrestled with myself over whether I should tell her. But deep in my heart, I knew the truth: she would not survive such a heartbreak on top of everything else. My brother, who's autistic and has always relied on our parents, lived with them. It felt as if I was holding a gun to my own family's head. Protecting my mother wasn't about taking my dad's side, I just couldn't devastate her. She left this earth thinking she had a loyal husband, and while I'll never stop questioning myself, I don't regret letting her die with that peace. My father, ironically, was a complete mess when she got sick, panic attacks, scrambling for emergency prescriptions, sobbing through every moment. All while this was happening, I tried, truly tried, to convince him and his parents that we needed to move Mom somewhere with cleaner air, somewhere that wouldn't suffocate her. Either to the East Coast, the place she called home and where I lived after graduating, surrounded by her side of the family, or maybe even the West Coast, near my dad's parents. I'd been pushing this idea for years before she got sick, desperate to get her out of that dusty, isolating place. Making friends there was nearly impossible, even for someone healthy and able-bodied, let alone my gentle, ailing mother. She was so alone. I'd call her nearly every day from my new home, and we'd talk for ages. Once, in a rare moment of vulnerability, she told me just how much those calls meant to her. She hated feeling like a burden and rarely showed her sadness, but I could feel it. Her soul was quiet and kind, undeserving of loneliness. I'll never forget the drive to the hospital with my dad when everything clicked into place. The reason he resisted moving, why he wouldn't leave, even as my mother suffocated, hit me like a tidal wave. He had a mistress, right there, in that same town. I said it aloud without thinking, and he broke down. No denial, no defense, just sobbing, as if he knew the cruelty of it all. My mother, the sweetest human I've ever known, was my best friend. Until then, I'd never kept a secret from her. The guilt eats at me, knowing that secret shaped her last year, that I didn't fight harder to reunite her with the family and friends who loved her. She deserves so much more. After her passing, we shipped her back east to be buried. It was only about 3 or 4 months later when my phone rang. My autistic brother was on the line, but in the background, I heard an unfamiliar woman's voice. "Who's that?" I asked. "Candy," he replied, fake name, but the impact hit me real. My stomach dropped. 3 months, and already the mistress was in my mother's home, alongside my vulnerable brother, who can't even reliably tell us if he's being mistreated. All I could do was encourage him, over and over, to let me know if he ever felt uneasy around her, knowing he mostly communicates in echoes from cartoons and books. A year flashed by. My dad's parents, who had always dreamed of a family vacation to Hawaii, stopped in my city for a quick visit during a road trip. It was during that visit that I broached the subject of Candy, revealing just how soon she'd appeared. Not long after, the Hawaii trip was canceled suddenly, some excuse about not finding the right hotel. But I could see through it. They'd invited Candy, and rather than letting us meet her, they called off the entire trip. 3 years have slid by now since my mom's death. I haven't set foot in my dad's house except right after she died, when he rushed us to sort through her belongings, practically before the ground had settled. Candy lives there now, maybe has all along. I haven't been to my grandparents' house on the West Coast since before Mom died. It's expensive, so it's never possible every year, but before, during Thanksgiving, my dad's side would at least call me on speakerphone while my family gathered, tell me they missed me, wished I was there. Since Mom's death, though, these calls stopped. Silence settles over Thanksgiving week, year after year. I only recently learned my dad and brother even visited my grandparents because an aunt randomly texted me. I started piecing it all together. The phone never rings on Thanksgiving because Candy has been there all along. My own family, who welcomed the mistress because she's so good with your brother, has quietly shut me out of holidays. It finally hit me, with grim clarity. I called my dad that night to see if my suspicions were true. They were. Candy goes to Thanksgiving, but I'm not even invited. My dad barely talked, passing the phone to my youngest cousin, and eventually it ends up with my grandma. She trotted out the old "wish you were here," and I called her bluff. How could they wish I was there, when I wasn't even invited? No calls, no messages, year after year. I called everyone out then and there. No one wanted to hear it. My grandma even let slip the real reason for the Hawaii trip's cancellation. She told me, without prompting, this is why we had to cancel Hawaii. I knew it. Inviting Candy mere months after my mother's death, without realizing she was a mistress at first, I can almost understand. Still, inviting your son's new girlfriend to Hawaii with the entire family less than a year after your daughter-in-law dies is wild to me. Thanksgiving, though. That felt intentional. Felt like they chose her, this stranger who helped break apart my family, over me, their own. Through all this, they keep telling me I need therapy, and sure, maybe I do. But it stings, because it's obvious their motivation is to spare themselves from any discord I might cause. I've forgiven so much. I lost my mom. I clung to my dad because I couldn't stand to lose both parents. I've heard stories about children who cut the cheating parent out entirely after a betrayal like this. In a way, I wish I had that freedom, but I don't. My brother will need me as a caretaker one day. I need to know what goes on in his life. But right now? I don't even know who my family is anymore. I'm obviously hurt as hell. My family has decided to exclude me from everything, except for my brother, and my grandmother thinks I'm overreacting. She tells me that I'm the reason for being left out, and I can't help but see right through it. Maybe that's why she's flown out to visit me a couple of times, always going on about being there for me and the importance of family, blah, blah, blah. I know it's just her guilty conscience eating at her. At this point, I honestly feel like it's enough for me to cut contact permanently, maybe just settling for the occasional update about my brother's life and health. If you've made it this far, I just want to thank you. This trauma dump had a lot of context, but it was necessary to understand the whole picture. Now that I'm thinking about it, there's no way Candy was unaware of my mom's existence. My mom was mostly housebound, impossible to hide. Unless Candy was just an incredibly gullible mistress and believed all those tired, cliché excuses that cheaters come up with, she had to know. I'm also pretty sure she stole one of my mom's purses. That still irks me. I really hope everyone out there is having a happier Thanksgiving than I am right now, lol. Let me add some background. My mom became disabled around 2014 due to a genetic illness that affects the lungs over time. My dad knew about her health issues before he even married her in the late 80s. In fact, they actually eloped so she could get on his better insurance sooner. After 2014, she was on oxygen permanently and became basically homebound, but she was completely herself until those final few weeks in the ICU in 2022. My father needed to take on a little more around the house after that, but honestly, it was nothing compared to what my mom did when my brother and I were growing up. I honestly cannot comprehend how she managed everything. Being the ultimate supermom, holding down a job, and suffering from nearly debilitating rheumatoid arthritis at the same time, which I'm sure only made her lung illness worse. My maternal grandmother also died from the same thing. I have the genetic variant just like my mom and grandmother did, but, thankfully, there are more treatment options available for me today. Update 1. On Thanksgiving Day, I decided to call my family while everyone was gathered in the same place. I waited until I was sure they'd finished Thanksgiving dinner, though I knew I'd still probably be accused of being dramatic. I had painstakingly typed out a letter saying everything I needed to say, but ultimately, my boyfriend convinced me not to allow any back and forth with them unless there was a licensed therapist present. So I made the decision to call everyone, not to air out every detail, but to make one thing perfectly clear: I would not be maintaining contact unless it was during family therapy, with a telehealth psychologist in attendance. Things didn't go exactly as I'd envisioned. I managed to reach my grandma, and asked if she could put me on speaker so everyone could hear what I had to say. She immediately responded with, "Are you going to be nice?" As if I've ever been anything but annoyed, I deflected and asked simply if everyone was there. When I made my announcement, my grandma reacted with thinly disguised glee at the word therapy. She chirped that therapy would be a great idea for me. But I shut that down instantly. Nope. If I'm doing therapy, I'm not doing it alone. Here's some context. Since discovering my dad's infidelity, my grandma has bent herself into pretzels to make excuses for him. She's desperate to spin this as a positive, saying having someone like Candy around helps my brother. Maybe it is, in some way. But I don't trust someone like Candy around him, not with everything I know. The only person in my corner during this call was my aunt by marriage, the same aunt who originally let me know my family was even gathering there for Thanksgiving. After I finished my announcement, I caught a muttered comment from my grandpa in the background, but I didn't quite catch the words. Based on how quick my grandma was to scold him, I can only imagine it was something snarky, which is par for the course. I kept it together until my grandma started in on how much I was missed, how everyone wished I was there. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I called them out, telling them I doubted that was true, pointing out that they haven't actually invited me for years, avoiding me during Thanksgiving, never even calling. I didn't bring up Candy directly or the affair. There were children present, but almost everyone in that room knew exactly what I was really talking about. But as soon as it was just me and my dad on the line, I couldn't hold back. I demanded to know why there was a homewrecker at Thanksgiving, and why I hadn't even been invited. He actually tried to defend Candy, insisting she wasn't a homewrecker. I shot back, "You have me to thank for that, having to lie to my own mom. But Candy very easily could have been a homewrecker. Good women do not poach a sick woman's husband." He went dead silent. That's his move. He never directly denies that Candy knew about my mom. He just shuts down and says nothing. That silence tells me everything I need to know. I can't pretend to know what it's truly like to have a terminally ill, disabled spouse. I suspect most people have no idea how they'd actually handle that until it's their reality. My dad was always one of the good ones for not abandoning my mom outright, but the guilt ate him alive while she was dying. One of the very few times I ever saw him cry was the night I found out about his mistress. The only other times were while my mom was dying and after she died. We never talked much about Candy, or even about my mom, after she passed. It was just too painful for both of us. He still tried to be a supportive father, but always kept his worlds, me and Candy, separate. I know one day I'll have to actually meet this woman. This whole mess has changed how I see love and relationships. I can't escape the feeling that if I ever do get married, no matter how wonderful the husband seems, if I get seriously ill someday, he'll do the same thing my father did. Because, apparently, that's just what people do. I even heard a joke about it. If a man doesn't bring a date to his wife's funeral, he's taking things slow. It sounds dark, but maybe it's true. Pessimistic? Sure. But true? Probably. The part that still stings is that I never made any demands or issued ultimatums. No, it's me or her. Yet my family seems to have made that choice on their own. If they really want to talk, they know how to reach out, through therapy. My maternal aunt has been my anchor through all of this. She'll let me know if my family tries to reach out about therapy or if something comes up with my brother. Thankfully, he has his own phone now, so I don't need anyone else as a go-between to stay in touch with him. As for everyone else? Blocked. My dad didn't sound the least bit serious about therapy. He ended our call with, "We'll talk soon." I responded, "At therapy," and he simply repeated himself. Since then, he reached out to my maternal aunt. Maybe she got through to him a little. I think he finally understands how serious this is, and maybe, if everyone has time to cool off and book sessions, he'll actually talk at some point. He's not someone who stigmatizes therapy or mental health, but he does have a habit of dodging his problems, so it might take time. As for my grandparents, I suspect I may never hear from them again. They'll try to avoid therapy, especially my grandpa. My grandma would probably go along, but as long as he won't, then she won't. He's my step-grandpa, and now that he has biological grandkids from my uncle, kids he's crazy about, he won't care if I disappear from the picture. Update 2. I honestly thought he'd duck it forever, but the Zoom link actually lit up on my screen. I sat there with my finger hovering over join so long I almost missed the little green light next to his name. He was already in the room when I clicked, camera a little too low, that familiar angle of a man who has never cared where his laptop landed. For a second I saw movement over his shoulder, a sliver of someone in the hall. The therapist introduced herself, asked us to confirm who was on, ground rules, confidentiality. I said, flat, that I wouldn't participate if his girlfriend was in the room, and he glanced to the side and said, "She's in the kitchen." The therapist asked him to shut the door. He did. It started predictably, "What do you want out of this?" I told her. I wanted clarity, I wanted boundaries respected, and I wanted my relationship with my brother protected from whatever mess he'd built around it. He did the thing he does, talked around the edges. We're all doing our best. It's been a hard few years. When she finally asked when, exactly, Candy entered his life, he said it like he was reading off a label he'd already peeled halfway. We met at church. The meal train, she was just helping. The therapist didn't blink. When did that begin? He stared at the camera as if he could disappear into the little green dot. A while before the pandemic, he said, so quiet I had to check my volume. The therapist asked, carefully, if helping meant in the house. He nodded. Sometimes she'd drop off food when I couldn't get away. He looked at me then. Your mom liked her soup. I don't remember what I said right after that, something like, she was in our house, and it came out hoarse. The therapist intervened long enough to keep me on the call. When I could breathe, I asked the only question that mattered. Did mom know who she was? He chose that familiar coward's road, silence. The therapist filled the space with words about timelines and perception and harm, but all I could hear was that sentence, rounding itself into a truth I had always known and still somehow couldn't think through without shaking. We made it another 20 minutes. He promised he wouldn't bring anyone into family gatherings that excluded me, and I said, then you've got nothing left to bring, and the therapist asked us to try again, less scorched earth. At the end, she asked if we wanted to schedule another session. He said yes before I could answer. We set it for 2 weeks. That night, my brother called. It was one of those sideways calls he makes, where he doesn't so much talk to you as pan the camera around like he's filming a documentary of whatever happens to be in front of him. The phone swung past the fridge and paused the way it does when he's excited to show me words. Whiteboard notes in my dad's blocky caps, HR meeting, insurance, and then, in bubbly handwriting I didn't recognize, C+D dinner 1222 with a little heart next to it. Below that, someone had drawn a ring. It could have been nothing, it could have been everything. He echoed a line from The Incredibles at me and then whispered, soft, wedding? The way he repeats a word when he wants to try it on. My stomach did that slow roll it does before bad news. I told him I loved him. He flapped his free hand at the camera and wandered off. I called my maternal aunt. She didn't tell me to calm down or that I was reading into it. She asked if I wanted the number for a disability attorney she trusts. I got it and called the next morning. The intake was a half hour of practical questions that felt like someone finally built a door in the wall I've been pushing on for years. Could I petition to be co-guardian when the time came? Could we set up supported decision-making agreements now, while he can be part of it? Could we make it harder for people with no legal tie to him to insert themselves into his care? Yes, yes, yes. The lawyer didn't promise miracles, but she could draft documents, plant flags. I hung up and cried the kind of relieved cry that scares you because it whistles on the way up. 2 days later, my brother texted me first. It was a picture of a menu. He loves menus. He will sit and read them like storybooks. In the top corner, in another one of those little bubbles, someone had written rehearsal 1221. I asked where he was. He sent me a pin. It wasn't far, and I was in my city, not theirs, and I have boundaries even when I want to torch them. But it was the first clear path I'd had in months to see him without going through the fortress. I messaged back, "Do you want me to meet you for hot chocolate?" He sent a gif of a penguin nodding. I wasn't prepared for her to be there when he arrived. I knew better than to be surprised. He doesn't drive, she gives rides, and men like my father delegate the most sensitive tasks to the least appropriate people. They walked in together, her cooing over something he was saying that made perfect sense if you speak my brother's language. She saw me and did that bright, apologetic smile people use to cross lines they've already decided don't matter. The purse hit me before her face did. My mom's purse wasn't designer, it was soft leather the color of tea with milk, with a tiny scratch across the front from where she caught it on a chair in our kitchen the week before Christmas in 2015. I know that scratch like I know my own hands. It was sitting against Candy's hip like it had been there its whole life. My brother launched himself at me, the way he does, all elbows and earnestness. I hugged him, hard. When I let go, I looked at her. She looked back like we were neighbors running into each other at the mailbox. "Hi," she said. "I'm so glad to finally meet you. Your dad thought it might be easier." I cut her off. "We're not doing this." It came out steady. She flinched, tiny, then recovered. "I brought soup a lot," she said, as if that absolved anything. "Your mom," I didn't let her finish. "Please don't say her name." My brother tugged on my sleeve and said, "Hot chocolate," a little too loudly, like the peacemaker he becomes when the air goes wrong. We got hot chocolate. She sat at a table across the room, texting furiously, eyes on us in these little flicks she probably thought were subtle. My brother read the whole menu aloud, front to back, despite it being 4 drinks and a pastry case. He told me a story about a cartoon episode he'd watched that morning, speaking in exact quotes and perfect timing, and between sentences he looked at me like he was checking to see if I'd vanish. I told him I wasn't going anywhere. When it was time to go, she came back up with that same bright smile. "Maybe next time we can all," I shook my head. "There won't be a next time like this." She looked genuinely confused, like I'd missed the part where she'd auditioned for sainthood. Her hand went to the purse strap without thinking. The scratch caught the light, familiar and obscene. I walked my brother to the door and told him I'd call him that night. He said, yes, and then, in a perfect echo of a line he's said since he was 8, "I love you more than peanut butter." It almost broke me in half. Back home, I emailed the lawyer and asked her to move faster. I pulled my mother's original medical power of attorney out of the file where I keep the documents that build the scaffolding of a life. Her handwriting looked back at me, loops and flourishes I could pick out of a lineup. I stared at it until the page blurred. The second therapy session didn't feel like a session so much as a test. He had done his homework the way men hand in math worksheets, numbers scratched in without showing any work. "We do want you at things," he said, and glanced off camera in a way that told me he was lying to himself. The therapist asked him directly if he was planning a wedding. He said, "After too long, we're talking about making it official. For insurance. It just makes sense." I could hear the hollow in his voice where love should have gone. I asked him if he could look me in the eye and tell me a date hasn't been picked. He swallowed. The therapist said something about how families often rush to stabilize the structure after a loss, and how sometimes that rebuilding tramples grief, and he nodded, like she'd given him an alibi. I told him what I'd tell any stranger who'd done what he's done. If he marries her, we will have to renegotiate everything from the ground up. Every boundary. Every expectation. He started to ask if I'd at least show up to a small dinner, and I said, no, and it was the cleanest no I've ever managed. I'm not waiting for them to do right by me to protect my brother. Papers are being drafted. The lawyer says we can file in January, that we can start the supported decision-making now so he has a say, what doctor he prefers, who can sit in on appointments, what happens if someone tries to isolate him. My aunt is my witness. My boyfriend drove me to the notary and didn't say a word unless I asked him to. It felt like putting sandbags around the foundations before the storm hits. Maybe it's already here. I keep thinking about that moment in the coffee shop when she almost said my mom's name, and how I realized it wasn't a slip. It was a claim. She is trying to write herself into our past to make the present more palatable. The scratch on the purse says otherwise. My mother lived a whole life that didn't include this woman. That is a fact. I'm not going to let anyone sand it down until it's smooth. Update 3. I thought the next ping on my phone would be the calendar reminder for our third therapy session. It wasn't. It was a county clerk notification I'd set up after the lawyer casually mentioned public records are public for a reason. 2 names. His and hers. Application approved. Issue date stamped so fresh it still felt damp, December 15th. I sent the screenshot to the therapist and to him with one line, "Is there anything you want to say before we meet?" And put my phone face down. He called immediately. He started with, "We were going to tell you, which is the sort of sentence that says everything it thinks it's hiding. I didn't ask for a date. He volunteered one anyway, like a kid coughing up the candy he swore he didn't steal, before the new year. It makes sense for insurance. I said, it makes sense for your taxes. He didn't laugh. He told me he hoped I could be happy for him. I told him I was done pretending that words could fill in what actions keep carving out. My brother sent me a video an hour later. He doesn't send videos, not in the way people mean. He hits record by accident while he's trying to find the front-facing camera. It was 6 seconds of nothing, except it wasn't. The angle was crooked, the way he always holds it when he's excited, and in the corner was a garment bag and somebody's white shoe peeking out from tissue paper. He swung the camera toward the fridge like he was proud to find letters again, and there was the whiteboard I know too well, rehearsal 1221 with prayer team, fellowship hall underneath, and a doodle heart turned into a cartoon ring. In the background, somebody laughed and it wasn't my father. I could hear my brother's whisper the way he does when he tries on a word, wedding. Then the video cut like a rope. I asked him if he wanted to go to the museum with me the next day. He said yes with 5 exclamation points and a screenshot of the dinosaur exhibit like we were planning a heist. I texted my dad that I'd meet them in the parking lot at 10, that it was just me and my brother, and his reply came back as a paragraph that tried to sound like consent and landed like a set of instructions. Just be kind. No drama. Don't put anything in his head. The last line made me laugh out loud in my kitchen, as if anything I could say would be louder than what they keep doing. They were late. Candy waved when they pulled in, like we were at a school drop-off and not this thing we are. She unbuckled him and handed me a backpack that didn't belong to him. Snack, she said, like we were co-parenting. There was a folded piece of paper stuck in the front pocket. House expectations, it said in a cheerful font. I didn't read it. My brother was vibrating with the very specific happiness he gets around elevators and maps. We spent 3 hours like we used to, me walking a step behind while he announced each exhibit title, him tapping the plaques with one finger, saving the gift shop for last because rules are rules even if you write them yourself. At the notary on the corner afterward, he hummed under his breath while the woman checked our IDs. He liked the stamp sound. He asked if he could press it. She laughed and let him do it on a blank sheet. Supported decision-making isn't a magic trick, the lawyer had said, but it's a door he gets to open himself. He signed his name carefully, each letter like a little block tower. He said, "There," and looked at me like he wanted a sticker. I told him he just did a grown-up thing, and he grinned so wide his eyes disappeared. My father called before we made it back to the parking lot. "What did you have him sign?" The tone was new, not angry, exactly, alarmed. The lawyer's letter had landed while we were looking at a fossil the size of a car. "Nothing that hurts him," I said. "Things that put him in the room for decisions that are about him." He accused me of going around him. I said I was going through the law. He said, "You're trying to control everything." I said, "I tried trusting you." He hung up. That night in therapy he came and braced. He'd clearly been briefed by someone, Candy or his own fear. He started with a statement that sounded practiced: "I'm allowed to make changes in my life." The therapist said he is. I said he is, too. Then I asked if I could say one thing without being interrupted. He nodded. "If you marry her this week, I will not acknowledge her as family," I said. "You can do what you want inside your house. Outside of it, with my brother, with any legal or medical gate, I am closing as many doors as I can to her. I am not punishing you. I am drawing a line so straight I could level furniture by it." He did the silence thing. The therapist was the one who finally asked, soft, if we could talk about the purse. He flinched like she'd slapped him. "She didn't steal it," he said, and I swear his eyes did that small shift my mom used to call the truth looking for a corner. "Your mother gave it to her." I held up my phone. A photo from Christmas 2015 filled the screen, my mother, sitting on the end of the couch with the purse in her lap, the scratch catching the tree lights like a tiny comet. I said nothing. He looked, then looked away. "She brought so much soup," he said, as if a pot of broth could explain a whole rewritten life. They got married 2 days later. I didn't hear it from him. My brother called me from a church bathroom, the echo so loud it hurt, his face a little too close to the lens. He was wearing a shirt he hates because of the buttons. He whispered my name like a secret and then, too noisy, and put his hands over his ears. I asked if he could count with me. We did 4s. He calmed in the way he always has, tiny exhale, shoulders dropping exactly 1 inch. He showed me the paper towel dispenser and then the sign on the door, bride, and then, accidentally, a sliver of white fabric in somebody's ankles in sparkly shoes. I kept my voice steady and told him to stay with me as long as he wanted. In the background I could hear a microphone crackle and my father's voice doing that public speaking cadence he taught himself for work. "We found each other through service," he said, and the words were a key turning in a lock I didn't know my body still had. My brother tilted the phone away and I got a blur of a bulletin board, fingerprints on paint, the corner of a framed photo with my mother in it because of course that church wouldn't know to take her out. I told him I was right there. He said, "Okay," and then, in the smallest voice, "Do I have to say Mom's name?" I told him no, that he could say peanut butter if they asked him to talk. He laughed, a single honk, and it got me through the next minute. I didn't go to war that night. I wrote emails. The lawyers sent the petition to the court clerk with expedite if appropriate flagged. She drafted a letter to my father asking him to preserve my brother's routines and access, to refrain from changing providers or emergency contacts until we're in front of a judge. She told me it wasn't binding, but it puts the court on notice. I mailed HIPAA releases to all the doctors my brother has ever seen with his signature already on them. I called Social Security and put my name on the record as an interested party for any representative payee changes. The woman on the phone had the voice of someone who has heard everything and believed none of it until the paper crossed her desk. She took down the note about girlfriend now wife and said, quietly, "We'll call you if anyone tries anything." My grandmother showed up the next day like a sitcom plot, except it wasn't funny. She called from the curb and said, "I'm outside," as if that counted as an ask. I let her in because some part of me is still that kid who thought grown-ups could fix things if only they brought enough casseroles. She took in my living room like it was a set. She told me I was making this harder than it has to be. Then she saw the magnet on my fridge. I hadn't put it there, it had fallen out of the backpack and stuck itself like a leech. Save the date. In script I recognize now as Candy's, the little heart dotting the I in their names, a photo taken at the park I grew up near, my mom's park. My grandmother's face did a complicated thing, sour and proud and tired all at once. "He says you won't even meet her," she said. I told her I've met her purse. That landed. She sank into a kitchen chair without asking and said, "He says your mother gave it to her." I didn't say what I was thinking. I held up the photo again. My grandmother looked at it for a long time. "I remember that scratch," she said finally. "Your mother was so mad at that chair." For a second the room filled up with my mom like it had been waiting in the hallway for permission to walk in. My grandma blinked and the spell popped. She started to cry the way she always has, quietly, no theatrics, one hand pressed to her mouth like she's trying to keep the leak small. "I don't know how to hold both," she said. "My son and your mother." I said, "You don't have to. You just have to stop pretending they're not touching." She left without asking me to hug her. I locked the door behind her and rested my forehead against it because I couldn't think of anywhere else to lean. This morning my brother called me from the backseat of a car. He does that sometimes, he likes the way the trees streak by. He held the phone up to the window, then turned it toward the front. Candy was driving. My father was in the passenger seat, hunched over his phone like it could save him. On the dash, tucked into the little slot where people put parking receipts, there was a folded paper with the county seal on the corner. "I know that seal now," he aimed the camera like he was saying, "See?" Then pulled it back to his face and said, "Clear as anything, sister is guardian friend." He smiled like he'd invented a new kind of math. I told him that's exactly right. I told him I'll see him Tuesday for burgers if he wants, and he said, yes, and then, peanut butter, just to make me laugh. They can build whatever story they want around soup and service and insurance. I'm building a paper wall they can't charm their way through, and when the door finally opens in a courtroom with bad fluorescent lights and a calendar that runs behind, it won't be because I yelled loud enough. It'll be because I did the work in the quiet, in the spaces where no one came to clap. The magnet is still on my fridge. I could throw it away. I haven't yet. It's a marker on a map. If nothing else, it tells me exactly where not to go.